Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're at. My name is Patrick Carter. I'm a Senior Practice Director here at Cyderes. My main focus is around data protection and cloud security, but I've spent about 15 years in the Microsoft space, security focused heavily. It's that some time with both Accenture and Avanade, as well as my time here at Cyderes. My main focus is around helping clients understand what where they're at within their Microsoft security journey, helping them map that out, and then tie that back to the overall risks and things like that they're trying to align to. We've also got Dave on the call, and I'll let him do a quick intro.
Hey everybody, my name's Dave Branscome. I'm a global partner security solutions architect. It's kind of a mouthful. Been at Microsoft a little over 17 years, and my focus has always been kind of the meat and potatoes stuff, Active Directory, Exchange, and then as we moved into the cloud, the Office 365, M365 stack, and security has always been an area of focus for me. So happy to be joined here.
All right. So today, what we're really looking at trying to do is help understand, kind of where the security landscape lies and how that relates to Microsoft, and then also outline how we help advise our clients to adopt the Microsoft security stack, understanding what their needs are and how Microsoft is able to address those, whether that's through simplifying your security systems and solutions, filling critical security gaps, both from a solution standpoint, but also when it comes to a resource, and then also staying ahead of compliance, as that's always a concern. So with that, Dave, I'll let you set the stage.
Yeah, so the point that's being made here on this slide is some of the challenges that our customers face and organizations in general are facing. There's really, if you kind of break it down, there's three critical challenges that organizations are confronted with, and things that undermine their ability to remain resilient from a cyber perspective. The first is fragmentation of security tools, and then we'll talk about like the shortage of skilled labor and personnel in the cybersecurity space. And then that's compounded with the escalation of compliance and regulatory demands. So when we go into customers, very often we'll see things, we'll go into a SOC operations room, and we might see a security operations team looking over, maybe dozens of different dashboards on their monitors. You might have one for endpoint detection, one for network traffic, others for identity, cloud, email, and so on. And so when you look at that, it very quickly becomes evident that the number of tools that they have to juggle is overwhelming. And in fact, when Microsoft does some research around this thing, we found that organizations are using as much as 80 different tools on average. Now we're talking about, kind of mid-sized to enterprise space. If you're a small medium business with 20 employees, you're probably not using 80 different tools. But on the higher end, we see this very commonly. And so when you have such a sprawling ecosystem of tools, it can be very difficult to maintain visibility and consistency in the way that you address problems on your network. So every tool, in effect, is generating its own silo of data. And if you think about what that would look like, you might have an attacker that's making a move against your organization. They might trigger an alert on the firewall system, and they might trigger an alert on the endpoint detection system. But if those systems aren't integrated, if they don't talk to each other, then the security analysts, and if security analysts don't talk to each other, you might have one that's watching the firewall, one that's watching the endpoints, but they're only seeing, within the scope of their tool. And so they have to manually piece things together and puzzle them together. So think about if you were like a policeman or a detective, and you're trying to solve a crime where the clues are scattered across different towns. Now you might be able to solve the crime, but it's going to take a lot more time to piece these things together. So if you think about the volume of alerts that this sort of patchwork of tooling generates or creates, even if you're very good at using those tools, it's still a lot to handle. When we look at enterprise organizations, we typically see them generating around 10,000 security alerts per day. Now, that doesn't mean 10,000 unique attacks or anything like that, just an alert of some sort. It might be benign, it might be a false positive, but that's an incredible amount of noise. And when that happens, it's just inevitable that some of those signals are going to get missed in the noise if it's up to humans to look at them all. So one of the systems might report a suspicious login, another reports some kind of unusual data traffic, but it may not be evident to the analyst that they're part of the same incident until they connect the dots, which may be hours, even days later. And so that delay in detection and response gives the attackers a head start. It may be enough to give them everything that they need. So when these alerts sit in different dashboards, the connections might be overlooked until the attackers already accomplished what they came to do. When you have these disjointed systems, you also have gaps in coverage. And so obviously no organization, even the largest organizations in the world, nobody deploys every tool everywhere. There's always some part of their infrastructure that isn't closely monitored simply because it's hard to cover everything, and there are budgets that constrain an organization. So attackers are very good at finding those weak spots. And I mean, we've all heard the story about the nation state that was able to compromise one of the casinos in Las Vegas by going through an IoT thermometer in a fish tank, right? So attackers target those blind spots, and when the security solutions aren't integrated, it's easy for them to find those gaps. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Patrick. So that's the first element that we're talking about is the proliferation of security tools. The second piece has to do with the cybersecurity talent shortage. So if you could imagine being the CISO of a company and you're trying to assemble a world-class security team, it may take months for you to find individuals that are qualified for the key roles. And that's the reality for many organizations. And that's true despite all the very widely publicized layoffs in the tech industry. Microsoft has had layoffs, Meta, Amazon. Many of these organizations have let go of very talented security professionals. But when we look at different points of data that have been generated by other organizations that have studied this, one called CyberSeek, there just aren't enough qualified cybersecurity professionals to fill the 85% or to fill 85% of the open cybersecurity jobs in the US. So that means there's about 15% of these jobs remain unfilled. And so when you don't have your headcount, what happens is the existing team has to pick up the slack. And that means people are spread thin across multiple different areas of responsibility. So you might have someone who's very talented as a network defender or network analyst, but they're covering cloud security, which may not be their strength. Or maybe they're doing incident response, which might not be their strength. And so you have weaknesses in kind of your armor. When you have those gaps in teams, it also impacts morale. It affects their effectiveness. And we see burnout as one of the larger problems in many organizations. One industry survey found that about 65% of SOC professionals have considered quitting their job because of the stress, because of the overload of work. So if you're an analyst and you've been asked to pull multiple 12-hour shifts, overnight shifts, because there's not enough people to do the 24/7 monitoring that is required of you, sooner or later, that person is going to decide, look, this just isn't worth the toll that this is taking on my family, on my personal life, on my health, and they're going to leave. And that's going to leave the people behind with an even greater burden because now they have to pick up the slack that was already a little too much for some of them to deal with. So that instability weakens an organization's security posture because with every departure, you don't just you lose a human, you lose expertise, you lose people that understand context, and that's very hard to replace. So, as one example, there was a mid-sized financial firm that had a team of 5 security analysts, but 2 of them left for better opportunities. One went on parental leave, and now suddenly the firm's ability to investigate the alerts in an effective manner, it dropped dramatically. There just weren't enough eyes on the screen. And so during that period, it just so happened a ransomware attack was performed during the overnight hours. Malware triggered some alerts at about 3 a.m., but the skeleton crew that was left, they couldn't triage the alerts fast enough. And so by the time that the responders were able to mobilize the next morning, the ransomware had already encrypted a big chunk of the data. So understaffing can also directly translate into slower incident response and increased damage when attackers do make or establish a foothold. So let's go to the next slide, please. So the third area that organizations are confronted with is the idea of non-compliance or the issue of regulatory compliance. So besides defending their network, companies have to satisfy a continually growing list of cybersecurity regulations and standards. And like I said, that's constantly expanding. We have for several years now dealt with standards like GDPR in Europe, and in California you have the CCPA, but there's also industry-specific standards, things like HIPAA for healthcare, PCI DSS for payment, the payment card industry, NIST framework for government contractors, and so on. So keeping up with just one of those is a major undertaking for an organization. And some organizations, Microsoft is one of them, have to comply with a wide array of these different regulations, depending on where they're located, who they do business with, and what kind of business they're doing. So each law comes with its own set of requirements. How do you store and encrypt data? How quickly are you expected to respond or report a breach? How do you handle user privacy requests and so on? So it often requires an organization to have a dedicated compliance team or a set of external consultants just to interpret the legalese and ensure that all the proper controls are in place. That's time consuming, it's expensive, and it goes beyond just pure technical knowledge, which means you have to find a person who can understand legal and regulatory language as well. And we know that the penalties are being enforced. As you see here on the slide, in January 2024, European authorities issued about 1.78 billion euros in fines, which is about $1.94 billion for GDPR violations. That's about a 14% increase from the previous year. So the fines aren't for show. They can be devastating to a company's finances. Now, in 2023, Meta, Facebook's parent company, was hit with a single GDPR fine of 1.2 billion euros for data transfer violations. That's one company, one case, and over $1 billion out the door. Now, that's not going to bankrupt Meta, but it demonstrates that the European regulators are taking GDPR very seriously. And in fact, the fines that are being issued are often scaled according to a company's revenue. So even a few $1 million of fine can exceed an entire year's security budget for a smaller size firm. So we have many different challenges that come with establishing security and compliance within an organization. So let's turn it back over to Patrick, and he can talk about how Cyderes comes into play in resolving some of these issues.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate that, and appreciate you setting the stage, because I think it highlights some of the real concerns that customers are having across the industry right now, and what they're looking at. And how does Microsoft address that? But how does Microsoft and Cyderes, through their partnership of both product and services, how did that really extend the investment that our customers are making right now with with Microsoft. And that's really what started our Microsoft cybersecurity adoption service, and why we started doing the workshops and partnering with our clients to understand that, because we saw with the E5 investment that a lot of our customers were making, they were looking at, and they were looking at, okay, maybe E5 was purchased for the modern workplace functionality or something else, but there are so many cybersecurity benefits that exist within the stack that our customers need to be able to start seeing an ROI on, and being able to do that. And a good example of that is we had one of the banks, one of the larger financial institutions up in Canada. We were working with. They were not an E5 customer, but in the process of us working with them, their IT team made that investment. And then when you started looking at the data protection benefits with Purview and DLP and things like that, there was a massive uptick in that capability. And then we help them be able to capitalize that. But if you look at that, not just across data protection, we look at it from a cloud standpoint, from a compliance standpoint, from an endpoint security standpoint, and so on. There are so many benefits that I think a lot of customers were not capitalizing on, and that really helped us kind of streamline and put this offering together, because it helps our clients, one, understand where they're at, what their cybersecurity supply chain looks like, and then how do we start filling those gaps? How do we start meeting those compliance needs? And that's really what the three main goals, if we look at the outcomes that we are looking at when it comes to this service, we are looking at being able to simplify complex security solutions. So when we talk about having, some of our customers having up to 80 cybersecurity solutions within their environment, that creates a complex security supply chain. You have to worry about a lot of different challenges there, whether it's integration of all the tools and how they communicate with one another. The skill sets needed, as we talked about a little bit about the talent pool out there. If you have 80 different solutions within your environment, the talent pool to be able to manage that's incredibly challenging. So being able to simplify that, and then also being able to simplify the alert response process, so that alert fatigue that exists. When you have 80 different tools yelling at you, it becomes overwhelming. But if by integrating, like with Microsoft, and you're able to integrate all these tools, optimize your alerts, tune them to your specific needs and environment, mute that noise, tune that out, you're able to get to what's really important really quickly. And when those critical alerts come in, now you've sifted through that noise that doesn't exist, so you're able to act and react a lot faster. Additionally, it gives you a increased visibility across the environment, so you're able to identify and fill security gaps as they come up. And even with the advent of what we're doing a lot with like AI and security as code, be able to proactively fill those gaps, create those remediations and things like that. So your response time is significantly reduced, and I think that's really critical. And the other outcome is just as David mentioned, is really staying ahead of compliance, understanding what are your compliance needs out, what are their requirements, from a jurisdictional standpoint, but then also from an regulatory alignment. Being able to stay in front of that, and with tools like Purview and some of the other ones that exist out there, really helps. And partnering with Microsoft, I think, has increased that visibility into compliance and being able to allow for that remediation a little faster. So diving in, how we simplify your security stack. One of the first things we do as part of our adoption services is get a good understanding of what are your specific security requirements, what are your needs, what are the risks that our customers have that are specific to their industry, and then understanding from a technology rationalization standpoint, how is their current technology stack meeting those needs, and then how can Microsoft overlay that, where identify those redundancies, where there's the opportunity to maybe insert like Defender for Endpoint or Defender for Identity, Purview, some of the other different solutions, so you can reduce your spend. You can simplify that supply chain. So, end-to-end Microsoft security coverage, I think, is critical. I think it allows you to have a more diverse security capability. We tailor that risk-based approach to your industry, to your specific needs as an organization. So, and I'll give you a good example of that. Within healthcare, for example, understanding the specific requirements and risks that healthcare organizations face, not just because they're healthcare and they're dealing with PII and PHI, but also if you're a healthcare organization in the US versus in Canada, are you a hospital a provider? Or are you an insurance provider within the healthcare space? And understanding the different risks and needs that are specific to your organization, I think is really important because you can tailor your Microsoft security stack to meet those needs. And then also it's about accelerating implementation. So time to value, I think, is really, really important. If we look at the consumption gap that exists between a tool like CrowdStrike, for example, and the tools that the features that are offered versus the ramp up time that our clients have between the initial implementation versus them actually being able to consume and get the benefits of all the advanced features is upwards of 2 years right now. So being able to accelerate your time to value with your Microsoft solutions, I think is really important. Being able to get that value instantly within the first 3 months of adopting it is really important. And that's where Cyderes and our experience, the talent that we have on the team, but also our ability to be able to apply what we are seeing with our other Microsoft customers and in the market, being able to accelerate your time to value is important. You see that ROI faster and you protect your environment faster. You're also able to mature your cybersecurity program significantly faster. And this actually leads right into identifying those critical security gaps. So augmenting your internal teams instantly. So being, one of the great things about Cyderes and what we're able to do is we're able to meet you at your journey, understanding exactly where you're at, and being able to jump in and add value instantly, kind of carrying over from that time to value, but giving you that visibility across the threat landscape. And this is where, when you go full stack Microsoft security, it gives you all the visibility, not just within your Active Directory environment or Entra, but so you have that identity space covered, you have your endpoint space covered, you have your cloud space covered with Defender for Cloud, but then also leading into the application security space. And this is some of the great capabilities I think Microsoft has been able to build out, is giving with tools like GitHub Security and other things. You're able to not just see from a directory standpoint or an infrastructure standpoint or an endpoint standpoint, but now you're able to get all the way down to your application code and provide that that visibility from your threat landscape full stack across all elements of your application security teams, to your infrastructure security teams, to your endpoint, directory, cloud, and so on. And when you're able to bring all that information together into like Sentinel, for example, you can now start to identify what's real and what's noise, and being able to reduce your security alerts through practice maturity, and being able to get to what's important faster. And I think with all the threat detection content we've been able to build over the years within Sentinel, I think that really, really advances the maturity of our clients and gives them the ability to see, what's important almost immediately. Additionally, with the advent of AI and the different threats that we're seeing with AI, I think that's also critical. Last thing I want to point out is just the different security gaps that are being introduced right now with the adoption of Copilot and other AI productivity tools. But specifically with Copilot, one of the biggest things we're hearing from our customers, and I actually met with one last week, is around how do we secure data in an AI ecosystem? And I think being able to take tools like Purview in the way it integrates directly with Copilot and the other Microsoft security stack, the way they can integrate into Copilot, as well as some of the other AI tools like ChatGPT, and being able to put your data protection controls in place, be able to assign, tag data, and have Copilot be able to filter and react to like role-based access controls based on data tagging and things like that is really, really important. And it's a gap that I think that's growing within our clients. So being able to address that and Microsoft's ability to grow with AI is important. And Cyderes has really focused the last 6 months around building that threat detection content, building out our capabilities with data protection for AI. Also, how do you secure your own custom AI applications that might be built in Azure and so forth. So I think it's really important, and it's something that that we've been able to address and we can bring our clients up to speed quite quickly on, and that's critical. All right. As we dive deeper into compliance, understanding what your current posture is from a compliance standpoint, are you understanding how our clients are compliant with whether it's NIST or HIPAA or SOX and so PCI and so on, and how Microsoft can come in and actually, the tools can help us ensure future compliance. One of the great features of Purview is now the compliance feature, and be able to actually be more proactive with system compliance and give you that visibility, and then be able to leveraging things like infrastructure as code and security as code to do those compliance remediations, immediately. What we call human in the loop remediations. This is another great example with a client, how we help them put together human in the loop auto remediation for their Azure environment, and leveraging tools like Purview Compliance and being able to actually identify compliance violations within their cloud systems. And then leveraging auto-generated or AI-generated infrastructure as code, have that put together. The human reviews that, approves it, and then it gets deployed same day. And being able to address those needs quickly, I think, has really shown how, with the advancements of not just the Microsoft security stack, but AI, when you bring all those things together, you can really reduce your exposure to those risks and ensure compliance across the environment. And then ultimately, what does that mean? Well, it means, less risk of audit. When audits do happen, you're assured that you're going to be able to pass them, and it minimizes your overall risk and exposure to fines. And I think that, when you bring all that together, that really, I think, complements, everything else that we're doing from a Microsoft security standpoint really, really well. So how do we deliver this? What it's really broken down into 3 phases. And it starts with the current state assessment, really understanding, what are your individual requirements, understanding how mature you are from a security posture standpoint across the Microsoft stack, but then also looking at all the other tools that might be deployed, those 80 tools like David mentioned. How does that, how does that exist? How mature are they with the environment? And then how does Microsoft overlay the top of that? Evaluating the configurations, the policies, the deployment statuses, because I can tell you how many customers I talk to that they'll, I say, oh, do you have Purview deployed in your environment? And they'll say yes, but what they do, they turned it on, maybe put in 2 or 3 policies and haven't taken it any further. So understanding, okay, just because something's deployed doesn't mean it's really in an operational state. We need to identify that. So gather all those insights. Talk to the different stakeholders within IT infrastructure, within your compliance team, within security, within the SOC, your network, and so on. Understanding what all those challenges are and bringing it together. From there, we build out your Microsoft roadmap that addresses each one of those compliance. We develop your compliance roadmap and how we want to adopt that. And we take you from wherever you are in your journey, whether you're at a maturity score of 0, all the way up, if you're starting, or if you could be starting from a 5 or even a 10, but being able to meet you where you're at in your journey, build out that roadmap, and then start helping you with executing that roadmap and adopting the Microsoft stack. And I think, really what's important is that playbook and integration with AI. AI, I think, is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. I think we all understand that it's going to be a part of our lives, whether you're in healthcare or banking or retail, hospitality. AI is here to stay, and understanding the security challenges thereof and how you want to address it, I think, are really, really important. And then from there, we operationalize with Cyderes managed services and professional services to really, streamline and take that weight off of your team, alleviate the talent problem that you have, and put it onto our team. And that frees your talent, your team up to go, do other things within your environment to take and push the envelope further from a development standpoint. Lastly, I just wanted to articulate how Microsoft or how Cyderes really wraps around the Microsoft security stack. And what I wanted to show is our expertise, whether it's Defender for Endpoint, Defender for XDR, Defender for Identity, or Defender for Cloud, what that really means and where our expertise comes into play. And what's great is we have multiple Microsoft principal architects on our team, and they really serve as the quarterback, so to speak, of our Microsoft deployments and delivery services. They work with you to understand, okay, do I need, what's your specific needs? And then they bring in that, the Defender for Endpoint SME, Defender for XDR SME, and so on as we work through the advisory services. And that really helps, I think, one, make sure you are not operating in silos. So your endpoint team is fully integrated and understanding what your cloud team is doing. Your compliance team is stretched across that full stack. And it allows us, I think, to really deliver at a high level, but also ensure that it's, we're not putting you guys in silos. We're not delivering in a stance that creates isolated solutions. The benefit, one of the things that's really important with the Microsoft Security Stack is the way that it brings it all together and allows for everyone to have that communication, whether it's your, like I said, your SOC team to your endpoint team and so on. I wanted to finish with kind of three highlights of from customers around what we've been able to do and how we've been successful delivering these types of services. So whether it's Wayne Cox at Sunnybrook or Mike Stevens or Stephen Ramirez with Renown Health, we've been able to support our clients on their Microsoft journey for years now. And I'll give you a good example with Stephen Ramirez. We've helped them build out their solutions with Azure. So one of the things that they struggle with really with cloud security was they didn't understand how they could actually move all of their applications out of AWS and into Azure with while ensuring security and compliance with PHI and HIPAA. And we were able to come in and help them architect what their Azure environment would look like, how they could do secure landing zone deployments, help them with that, actually help them build all their infrastructure as code for secure Azure landing zone, deployed Defender for Cloud, deployed Defender for Identity, started them on the journey for Defender for Endpoint, and so on. So through these workshops around our Microsoft advisory services, we were really able to put them on a journey, but it started with an ask around moving applications from AWS into Azure. And I think that's important to kind of highlight is how it typically starts with a small ask around a very specific thing. But as we work with our customers, and we identify those requirements, it helps mold out what their Microsoft journey really looks like. And Renown Health, I think, is well on their way. And will likely be full Microsoft security stack by the end of 2027.
So if a customer was interested in engaging with Cyderes to evaluate their data estate, do you have a specific offering that they could look into?
Absolutely. So yeah, so when we come into the data estate evaluation, we have our Microsoft security, Microsoft data advisory service and rapid deployment of Microsoft Purview. So it's a two-part engagement. First is where we look at the overall how they're managing like their data lifecycle, data security program or data protection program. So things like classification level. They understand their data lifecycle, any regulatory requirements around data protection. Then from there, we jump into looking at what they've built, and even building out their data sensitivity labels, all of that aspect within the Microsoft stack, and then do an e-discovery exercise of their structured and unstructured data in Office 365 at the endpoint, cloud, on-prem level to identify where protected data lives within their environment, how it's being moved and used, And then, from there, you can actually begin the journey of enforcement. So building out those data protection policies, monitoring for it, putting that in place, et cetera.
So that would cover cloud and on-prem even.
Cloud, on-prem, Office 365, other SaaS applications like Salesforce, et cetera. So for any customers out there that are looking to engage with a service like this, I would say please reach out to your Cyderes sales representative. They can get my team engaged, and we can start the process of scoping this out. We have our standard scope, but then we want to work with each customer to customize it to their specific needs to make sure the outcomes are aligned to what they need. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.